I found the tape in a basement that hadn't been opened in 32 years. The label was written in crayon. The handwriting belonged to a 10-year-old girl who drowned the next day. There were 43 tapes total, each one recorded the night before the Mercy Bridge tragedy. Each one made by a different child, and not one of them was ever supposed to be found. April 17th, 1987. 6 kids from Mercy Elementary went to the bridge after school. By sundown, all 6 were dead. The town called it an accident. But these tapes, they told a different story. And once I pressed play, I understood why this town spent 3 decades trying to forget. Because the kids knew. They knew something was wrong. Caddy Brooks recorded hers at 11:47 p.m. You can hear her whispering, like she didn't want anyone else in the house to know. And what she says in the first 10 seconds changes everything. She starts with a goodbye, like she already knew, like all 6 of them knew they weren't coming back. But why would 10-year-olds go to a bridge they thought would kill them? The bridge is still there, condemned since the late 90s. No one talks about it. No memorial. No flowers. Just silence. Like the whole town agreed to pretend it never happened. The official report said the bridge railing gave way, that the kids fell through together, that it was structural failure, nothing more. Parents were told to grieve and move forward. But grief doesn't explain why 3 families left Mercy within a year, or why the school's janitor quit the day after the funerals and never spoke to anyone again, or why Sheriff Moss sealed the case. I've been chasing cold cases for 7 years. I thought I'd seen every kind of cover-up. But Mercy, Iowa? This was different, because the kids left proof, and someone hid it for 3 decades. Thomas Reed, 71 years old, former janitor, the man who found the bodies, and the man who, according to property records, still owned the school building after it closed in 2003. When I showed him the tape, he didn't ask where I found it. He didn't act surprised. He just stared at it like he'd been waiting 32 years for someone to knock on his door. He poured himself a drink before he said a word. His hand shook so badly he spilled it. Then he looked at me and said, "You shouldn't have come here. They'll know you know." And then he told me everything. I grew up 3 hours south of Mercy. Small towns like this are everywhere, and Iowa places where everyone knows your name and your secrets, and they hold both close forever. When I was 19, my little brother disappeared. No body, no answers, just theories and silence. I learned early that the worst kind of grief is the kind without a story to close it. So I started a podcast. Not for fame, not for money, for the families still searching. I find the stories no one wants told. I dig until something breaks. And Mercy? It broke wide open. Mercy looks like a postcard from 1953. Single stoplight. 1 diner. 1 church. The kind of place where everyone waves, even if they don't know you. But no one waved at me. I asked about the bridge at the diner. The waitress pretended not to hear me. The man next to me paid his bill and left without finishing his pie. In Mercy, silence isn't golden. It's survival. I've been to towns like this before, places that protect their own. But Mercy felt different. It didn't just bury its secrets, It built a life on top of them, and I was digging too close. The librarian told me they'd lost all school records before 1990 in a flood, but Mercy hasn't flooded in 60 years. When I asked again, she told me the library was closing early, but money talks even in towns that pretend it doesn't. She wrote one name, one address, and she said, "If he talks to you, you didn't hear it from me. And don't come back here." Thomas Reed. The name meant nothing at first, but when I cross-referenced it with old news archives, I found him. School janitor, first responder, the man who pulled 6 children from the river. In every photo from that week, Thomas looked like he'd seen something no one should see. And in every photo, Sheriff Moss was right beside him, like a handler, like a guard. I've interviewed killers, witnesses who lied to protect themselves, families torn apart by truth. But sitting outside Thomas Reed's house, I felt something I hadn't felt in years. I felt afraid. Thomas had a daughter once. One found her name in an old yearbook, Sarah Reed, class of '95. But when I searched for her, I found nothing. Like she'd vanished, or been erased. When he opened the door, he didn't ask who I was. He didn't ask what I wanted. He just stared at me and said, "You're here about the kids." Like he'd been expecting me for 30 years. Every picture frame in that house was turned backwards. Every single one. I asked him why. He didn't answer. He just led me to the basement and said, "This is what you came for." 43 tapes. One for every student in Caddy Brooks' 4th grade class. Recorded the night of April 16th, 1987. The night before 6 of them died. Thomas told me to take whichever one I wanted, but his voice cracked when he said it, like giving them away was the hardest thing he'd ever done. Or maybe the bravest. Katie's voice was so small, so careful, like she was trying not to wake someone up. She starts by saying her full name, her birthday, and her address, like she was making a witness statement. She mentions a teacher, Miss Holloway, 4th grade teacher. I checked the school records. Miss Holloway resigned May 1st, 1987, 2 weeks after the drownings. No forwarding address. Miss Holloway was 26, fresh out of college. By all accounts, the kids loved her. But after the drownings, not a single parent spoke her name. She was erased, like she never existed. Thomas wouldn't answer. Not at first. He just kept saying they were kids. They didn't know better. But when I pressed him, he finally broke. And what he said made my blood run cold. He told me the kids had done something. An experiment. A project for the school science fair. Something with recordings and frequencies. Something Miss Holloway called contact beyond the veil. They thought it was a game, a ghost hunting project. They recorded hours of silence in the old part of the school, the section built in 1890, where 3 children died in a fire. When they played the tapes back, they heard something. Voices, patterns, words they couldn't quite make out. But Miss Holloway heard them clearly, and whatever she heard, it terrified her. Thomas was working late that night. He saw her through the window, burning everything, crying. He knocked. She wouldn't let him in. She just kept saying, "It's not their fault." It's mine. 2 days before the drownings, Miss Holloway told the class they needed to return what they'd borrowed. She made them promise to go to the bridge. All of them, together, at 4 p.m., April 17th. Close the door. Those were her words. And the kids believed her. They didn't tell their parents. They didn't ask questions. They just went. Because they trusted her. Because she was their teacher. Thomas knew. The morning of April 17th, Kathy Brooks came to him before school. She gave him the tape. She said, "If we don't come back, make sure someone hears this." And he took it. He thought she was being dramatic. Kids with big imaginations. He put the tape in his locker and forgot about it. Until 3 hours later, when Sheriff Moss called him to the bridge. Thomas was the first one there. He saw them, all 6, still in their school clothes, holding hands, floating face down in the water, and on the bridge railing, carved into the wood, symbols, the same ones from the classroom. Sheriff Moss told him to forget what he saw, told him the carvings were just kids being kids, told him to keep his mouth shut or the whole town would turn on him. And then he paid him. He kept the money, kept the tapes, kept the secret, for 32 years. And every night since he's woken up hearing their voices, the ones on the recordings, the ones under the water. I asked him if anyone else knew about the tapes. He said only one person, the person who made him hide them in the first place. Sheriff Garrett Moss, the man who buried Mercy's secret. As I left, Thomas said something I'll never forget. He said, "They died doing what they were told, and the person who told them is still out there, and she's not done." I left Thomas's house with 43 voices of the dead, 43 children who recorded their last thoughts before walking into the water, and I knew I had to find the woman who sent them there. Finding Miss Holloway should have been impossible. No social media, no employment records after 1987, no marriage license or death certificate. She'd vanished. But people don't just disappear. Not completely. I spent 2 days searching, called every school district in Iowa, checked obituaries, prison records, mental health facilities. Then I found it. A single mention in a Cedar Rapids community newsletter from 2012. Margaret Holloway, living under her middle name, working as a church volunteer in Cedar Rapids, 60 miles from Mercy. The photo was grainy, but I knew it was her. Same eyes, still haunted. I sat outside her house for 3 hours before I knocked. Part of me wondered what I'd say to someone who sent children to their death. Part of me wondered if she even remembered them. She opened the door with a smile, like she was expecting a neighbor. I said my name, said I was a journalist. The smile didn't fade. She said, "I've been waiting for you," and she let me in. Her house was filled with crosses, dozens of them, every wall, every surface, like she was trying to keep something out, or maybe keep something in. She offered me tea. I declined. I showed her Katie's tape. I didn't say anything, just placed it between us. And for the first time in 32 years, Margaret Holloway stopped pretending. She looked at it and whispered, "I killed them." She didn't wait for me to ask questions. She just started talking, like she'd been holding it in for 3 decades, like she'd rehearsed this confession every night before sleep. And what she told me changed everything. She was 26, fresh out of a teaching program. She'd read a book about EV, electronic voice phenomena, ghost hunting. She thought it would be a fun project, something to make science exciting for kids. They recorded for 2 weeks, every day after school. At first, nothing. Then small things, whispers, taps. One day, a child's voice came through clearly. It said a name, the name of a student who died in the 1890 fire. Margaret listened to all the recordings alone one night, and she heard something the children hadn't. Beneath the voices was a pattern, a rhythm, and buried in that rhythm were words, the same phrase over and over, "Bring them home." She thought the voices were asking for a memorial, a ceremony. She researched the fire victims, found out they'd been near the river when the school burned. She convinced herself they wanted to be returned to that place. She told the kids they needed to close the door they'd opened, told them to bring something personal to offer at the bridge, told them it was important, sacred. And because she was their teacher, they believed her. 6 kids went. Not all 43, only the ones who'd been there from the beginning. The core group. Caddy Brooks, Michael Chun, Sarah Winters, David Moss, Emma Tall, and Jacob Hart. They went because they felt responsible. No one knows exactly what happened next. Margaret wasn't there. Thomas found them an hour later. But the way they were positioned, hands linked, personal items floating beside them, it looked deliberate, like they'd walked in together. She swears she never meant for them to die, that she told them to leave items at the water's edge. But the tapes tell a different story. The kids heard something else, something she didn't say, or something she said without realizing. Katie's recording is clear. Go into the water, all the way under. Margaret insists she never said that. But 6 children heard it. 6 children obeyed. And 6 children never came back up. I asked her what the voices really said, what was buried beneath the static. She looked at me with hollow eyes and said, "They said my name. They knew who I was, and they wanted replacements." She's been recording at the bridge every April 17th since 1987, trying to hear their voices, trying to apologize, trying to understand. And every year she hears the same thing, "Bring them home." She begged me to expose it, to tell the families what really happened. She said Sheriff Moss forced her to resign, paid her to disappear, and warned her that if she ever spoke, he'd make sure she went to prison. I left Margaret Holloway in that house full of crosses and tapes. I don't know if she's a murderer or a victim, maybe both. But one thing was clear, Sheriff Moss knew, and he buried it. I had 2 choices. Let the story die with Margaret, or confront the man who made sure it stayed buried for 32 years, the man who paid for silence, the man whose son died on that bridge, David Moss, 10 years old, son of Sheriff Garrett Moss, one of the 6 who drowned. That detail was buried deep, never mentioned in news reports, never spoken about. But it was there in the death records. He was expecting me. I don't know how. Maybe Thomas called him. Maybe Margaret. Or maybe in a town like Mercy, everyone knows when someone's asking the wrong questions. He said, "You're trespassing." Inside, David's face was everywhere. School photos, Little League, a flag-draped box on the mantel, probably his ashes. Moss didn't offer tea, didn't ask why I was there. He just sat down and said, "Go ahead, ask." I showed him the tape. His expression didn't change, but his hands clenched into fists. He stared at it for a full minute. Then he said, "Where'd you get that?" Like he already knew, like he'd been dreading this moment. He blamed Margaret completely. Said she put ideas in the kids' heads. Said she manipulated them. And maybe she did. But when I asked why he covered it up instead of prosecuting her, his answer chilled me. Because if people knew what those kids were doing, they'd ask what David recorded on his tape. And I couldn't let anyone hear that. David Moss made a tape too, the night before he died. But unlike the others, his wasn't a goodbye. It was a confession. And what he confessed would have destroyed his father, destroyed the whole town. David was being abused. So were two other kids in that class. They'd told Margaret during the recordings project. She told them the ceremony would cleanse their pain. She believed it, and they believed her. Those kids didn't just walk into the water because of a school project. They walked in because they wanted the pain to stop. Margaret promised them peace, and in the most horrific way, they found it. If the tapes went public, Mercy would learn that its sheriff beat his wife, that other fathers did the same, that teachers and neighbors knew and did nothing. The town would tear itself apart. So Moss buried it. He'd kept them, all 6 originals, the ones the kids gave to Margaret before the ceremony. He took them from her house the day after the drownings. He's been guarding them for 32 years, protecting himself. He gave me the tapes, just like that. I don't think he wanted to carry them anymore. But he warned me, the truth won't bring them back. It'll just make sure they died for nothing. Margaret wasn't just conducting a paranormal experiment. She was trying to help kids she knew were suffering. And in her desperation to fix what she couldn't control, she led them to their deaths. Both truths can exist. One more thing. Margaret goes to that bridge every April 17th. You want the whole story? You should be there tomorrow. I hadn't realized the date. April 16th. The anniversary. The same night the kids recorded their tapes. And tomorrow Margaret would be at the bridge, alone, listening for voices that never stop calling. Garrett Moss is a monster, and he's a grieving father. Both truths exist. He protected himself by silencing a town, but he also lost his son to a tragedy he couldn't prevent. Guilt wears many faces. As I drove away, I realized something. Moss gave me the tapes because he knew I'd struggle with what to do. He knew the truth was more complicated than guilt and innocence. He was passing the burden. Mercy didn't want me there. I felt it in every stare, every silence. This town had chosen its story 32 years ago, and I was threatening to rewrite it. In small towns, outsiders aren't just unwelcome. They're dangerous. I should have left Mercy that night, driven straight to my editor, released the tapes. But I needed to know how the story ended. and Margaret Holloway was the only one who could tell me. I had every tape, every goodbye, every confession. I could listen to all of them, learn every secret. But some doors shouldn't be opened. Some voices should stay silent. I put David's tape back, unopened. The text came from a blocked number. 3 words. Leave mercy. No explanation. I should have been scared. Maybe I was, but I'd come too far. Tomorrow I'd go to the bridge. Tomorrow I'd meet Margaret. Tomorrow I'd finish this. I didn't sleep that night. I couldn't, because I knew that whatever happened at the bridge in 1987 wasn't finished. And tomorrow I'd learn why. April 17th. 32 years to the day. The bridge looked different in daylight. Not scary, just sad. Like it was tired of holding on to what happened there. Tired of being a grave no one visits. Margaret was already there, standing exactly where the kids would have stood. Same time, same place. I called her name. She didn't turn around. She just said, "Did you bring them?" The tapes? She wanted to hold them, to hear their voices one more time, but she couldn't bring herself to touch the box. She said, "I hear them anyway, every year. They call my name. They ask me why." She played me her recordings, years of them, and I'll admit there were sounds, patterns, maybe voices, or maybe just the wind and water mixing into what we want to hear, what we need to hear, apologies without words. Do you really believe they're here? Or is this penance? Margaret turned, looked at me with hollow eyes. Does it matter? Either way, I killed them. Either way, I can't leave. Margaret Holloway has been haunted for 32 years. Whether by ghosts or guilt, I don't know. But she's trapped here just as much as those kids are. This bridge is her prison, and she chose it. This was the moment, the choice. Expose the truth and destroy what's left of 6 families, or bury it again. Let mercy keep its silence. Margaret looked at me and said, "I can't make that choice. That's yours now." For a moment I thought she was going to jump, that this was her final act of penance. But she stepped back, said she'd spent 32 years wanting to join them, but staying alive was the harder punishment. Margaret said, "David's secret isn't yours to tell. He didn't record that tape for the world. He recorded it for himself, to feel heard, even if no one was listening. Sometimes the act of speaking is enough." I put it back, not because I was protecting Moss, but because David Moss deserved to keep one thing for himself: his pain, his words, his choice, and I had no right to take that from him. Margaret suddenly stiffened, listening. She whispered, "They're here." I looked around, saw nothing, just fog and trees. But Margaret was transfixed, staring at the water. I followed her gaze. The water seemed to shimmer strangely. Margaret said she felt them every year at this exact time, 4:16 p.m., the moment they went under. She said the air changed, got heavier. I wanted to dismiss it, but standing there, I felt it too. My recorder turned on by itself. Battery malfunction? Probably. But the sound that came through, I can't explain it. 6 distinct voices, speaking at once, saying the same thing. I heard it. Margaret heard it. Maybe you would too. They weren't asking to be saved. They were asking to be remembered. Truly remembered. Not as an accident. Not as a tragedy no one talks about. But as children who trusted the wrong person at the wrong time. Margaret gave me permission. Not just to expose her, but to expose everything. The abuse. The experiment. My guilt. Moss's cover-up. Let them be whole. Not just victims. Why do you really come here every year? Is it guilt? Or do you actually hear them? Margaret smiled first, genuine smile I'd seen. Maybe both. Maybe neither. But I owe them my time. I realized then that Margaret Holloway wasn't coming to the bridge for forgiveness. She was coming because she promised them something 32 years ago. And even though it killed them, she kept showing up. That's love. And grief. We threw flowers. One for each child. Caddy Brooks. Michael Chun. Sarah Winters. David Moss. Emma Tall. Jacob Hart. Their names spoken aloud. Not as a list, but as people, as losses, as lives that mattered. We stood there until the sun started to set. Not talking, just being. Two people connected by 6 children we never knew. Margaret lost them through her actions. I found them through mine. Both of us changed forever. 2 words carved into the bridge. Hidden beneath 30 years of caution tape. We tried. Not a suicide note. Not a confession. Just 2 words from kids who thought they were doing the right thing. Margaret drove away first. I watched her car disappear into the fog. I don't know if I'll ever see her again. I don't know if she wants me to. But she gave me something precious. Permission to choose. I made my choice on that bridge. Some stories need to be told. Some secrets need to die. And some, like David's tape, need to be both. Told, but not shared. Honored, but not exploited. I left Mercy that day with 43 voices. And a choice. Release everything and let the world judge? Or tell the story my way, with context, with care, with the complexity these children deserve. 6 months later, I released the story. Not as a true crime podcast. Not as an expose. But as what it really was. A tragedy born from good intentions, buried by bad choices, and remembered by no one. The story went national. Major news outlets picked it up. Podcasters dissected it. True crime forums debated it. For 2 weeks, Mercy, Iowa, was the center of attention it never wanted. And then something unexpected happened. The families reached out. Not all of them, but enough. Some were angry I dug it up. Others thanked me for finally saying their children's names. Sarah Winters' mother wrote, "Now I understand why she went. Thank you." Margaret didn't hide. She gave one interview, admitted everything. The experiment, the ceremony, the guilt. She didn't ask for forgiveness. Didn't claim she was a victim. Just took responsibility. Then she stopped answering calls. Garrett Moss never spoke publicly. Never apologized. Never admitted to the cover-up. He died 8 months later. Heart attack. Some said it was guilt. Others said it was just time. Either way, he took his silence to the grave. Thomas Reed disappeared. Left Mercy the day my podcast aired. Part of me hopes he found peace. Part of me knows he won't. Some burdens don't have expiration dates. Some you carry until you can't anymore. Mercy built a memorial. Small bronze plaques on the bridge. Each child's name. Their ages. One sentence, they tried. That's all. But it's enough. The bridge isn't a crime scene anymore. It's a place to remember. People leave things now. Flowers, drawings, notes. One said, "I'm 10 too. I would have been your friend." That's what the kids deserved all along. To be seen not as victims, but as children. Real. Whole. Missed. I never released David's tape. Never listened to it. I sent it to his mother with a note explaining why. She wrote back 2 words. "Thank you." That was the right choice. Not all truth needs an audience. The podcast was downloaded 4 million times. It won awards. Got optioned for a documentary. But none of that matters as much as this. 6 kids who died believing no one would remember them are now unforgettable. I think about them often. Wonder what they'd have become. Who they'd have loved. What they'd have created. But mostly, I hope wherever they are, they know someone finally heard them. Someone finally told their story right. I'm different now. More careful. More thoughtful. I learned that truth isn't always justice. Sometimes truth is just understanding. And sometimes understanding is all we can offer the dead. It's all they're asking for. People reach out now, every day. Stories that need telling. Secrets that need light. And I listen. Because that's what I do. I find the voices that were silenced. And I make sure they're heard. Even when it's hard. Especially then. The Mercy Bridge stands exactly where it always has. The wood is rotting. The caution tape is fading. But it's not forgotten anymore. And maybe that's what the kids wanted all along. Not to be saved. Just to be remembered. This story is dedicated to every child who tried to tell an adult something was wrong and wasn't believed. To every kid who thought they had to fix their own pain. To everyone still waiting to be heard. If you're hearing this, it means someone finally cared enough to look. Thank you for listening. That's all we ever wanted.